Hey everyone, my name is Izzy the Nerdy Christian, and today we are going to be blind reacting to a talk that was given about men's mental health, particularly Black men's mental health. I have been doing a series on men's mental health and Pride Month because it is both in the month of June, and I wanted to talk about both and try to navigate those conversations as best as I was able. So, this is going to be about men's mental health. I'm kind of curious as to how w- we should address Black men's mental health and how that might differ from addressing other people's mental health, especially as a Black guy myself. So I'm pretty curious. This is gonna be a blind reaction, so I've not seen this video prior to reacting to it here. But I think it's important to highlight these issues, and I thought that highlighting mental health in the Black community was important, especially because, as far as I've seen, there definitely is a cultural trend in the Black community to not care about your mental health. So. Uh, Let's get into this. Real quick before we start the video, let me know how you guys like this video formatting. I'm trying to figure out what would be the best way to format these pre-recorded videos. So let me know if you guys like this as well. But let's go ahead and get into this conversation.
Death, depression, divorce, debt, devastation, deadbeat, despair. There is a Black male mental health struggle. I became a therapist in therapy. The unsustainability of Black male trauma, Black male rage, Black male resentment is a real thing, an unsustainable thing. So, what's the struggle? 1 in 4 psychologists are Black. And when I say Black, I mean that includes Black men and Black women.
Mm.
According to the American Psychological Association, 4% psychologists worldwide. Nah, in this country.
Wow, that is not a lot. um, Dang, I appreciate the fact that you're making me feel alone. I'm joking, but yeah, that is really interesting. I was not aware of that.
Are Black. For every 100,000 Black Americans, only one Black psychiatrist.
Mm.
7% of Black men received any form of mental health services in the last couple years.
Mm.
Right? Black youth, particularly Black boys, are introduced with the struggle of mental health at a very early age. It's treated in elementary school by suspensions or special education referrals. What's the Black struggle? That's it. The inadequacy of practitioners who look like Black men who have a unique experience with mental health. Right? What does that mean for all of us? The current mental health industry does not sustain Black male trauma, Black male rage, Black male resentment, which means we have to look at the factors that are uniquely attributed to Black males in this country. What makes me qualified to talk about Black male mental health struggle? Well, beyond the obvious of being a Black male, I crashed in 2008, the year the mortgage industry crashed, the real estate market, right? That
Mm.
same year, my mother informed me she had stage 4 cancer.
Mm.
In 2009, I became a father for the fourth time. But this time was unique because the child was already 21 years old, which means right before my 17th birthday, I had a child.
Mm.
In 2010, my mother ended up passing away from cancer. I moved her from Chicago to Georgia before the diagnosis to live out her golden years under the sun of the South, to work with me and for me. She ended up passing. In 2011, I went to what I now label as a very eventful divorce. I lost everything. I walked away from everything. I lost my family, my spouse at the time away from the children, assets, things of that nature. In 2012, I experienced my very first panic attack. Found myself in the middle of a public park here in Atlanta, lying on my back, crying profusely for what seems like hours. In 2013, I had my second panic attack. This one was different. This one, I was with the partner at the time, and she said that she overheard me saying some things that were troubling. Later on that day, I had a special event I needed to be at. My friend at the time took me to the local emergency room because as Black males, that is how we address our mental health struggles, right? When it really gets to a point, you have to see someone at the local hospital emergency room. So of course they kept me 72 hours, suicide watch. I missed the court date. My partner at the time took the signed medical excuse to court at the time that I was supposed to report. The judge refused it, subsequently generating a bench warrant, and I eventually had to address that. That same year, 2013.
What? Not that I don't believe him or anything, but that's insane. How could they just not care about the fact that you needed to miss the court date because you were in the hospital for legitimate reasons? Like mental health is a legitimate concern and reason not to do something. Wow. Wow, 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 wow.
13, my father passed. Just when we were attempting to repair a 40-plus year fragmented, fragile, broken relationship, he passed. Went to Chicago, did the mourning, came back to Atlanta. 2 days after mourning my dad's death, was pulled over by local law enforcement. Had to settle that warrant from a few months earlier.
Right.
So for the next 57 days, I sat in a jail cell, in a jumpsuit, grieving what I thought initially was only my father's death. What I now know was all of the stressors, the losses, the trauma, the rage, the resentment I had since I crashed the same year the mortgage and real estate market crashed.
Yeah, that's a really important thing to note. I don't know if he is going to mention or has ever been through like a suicide attempt or anything like that. But very often, people who struggle with suicidal thoughts and actions and things like that, for a lot of them, not all of them, of course, but for a lot of them, it is not one event that triggers a want or desire to end your own life. It is a multitude of different things. Such and life itself becomes so egregious that it looks it like a better option to take your own life. For whatever reason, due to multiple factors, the person has come to the conclusion that ending your own life would be better than continuing to live this existence. And I do think that's a really important thing to point out that some people who don't necessarily understand suicide and things like that miss. So I would not be surprised at all if he thought about suicide while he was in a jail cell or anything like that, considering stuff just kept happening year after year after year, as he's pointed out.
So during that time, I went to 5 different therapists. Now, I wasn't shy from therapy because my mother, bless her heart, she was ahead of her time. She took me to see a therapist in high school. We're talking in the 80s.
Mm.
Good thing is, it ended up being family therapy, and we learned a lot of tools and strategies that really benefited us.
That is really good. He's in a really unique position. I had very interesting parents growing up, but my dad in particular, both my parents, but my dad in particular, my black father, really did not ever want to go to therapy or anything like that. And I think that this is a cultural trend in general, but particularly in the black community, where there is this notion again, it seems to be generally in the culture, but like I said, also in the black community, that you need to lace yourself up by your bootstraps and get to what you need to do. There's nothing to it but to do it, and nothing should stop you. Uh, it's nice because that does encourage some drive in you, perhaps, but at the same time, you have to stop and be like, "Well, whoa." There are just situations in life that just happen when it comes to mental health and other things like panic attacks, like other things, depression and suicide and whatnot, that need to be addressed. You have to be able to put the boots on, right? And you have to want to put them on, right? So, um, but I do see that in the Black community more generally. I I don't know a lot of Black people that would ever want to go to therapy. And pointing out the fact that there aren't a lot of Black psychologists, or and so on would be really important because I think personally that one of the important aspects of therapy and psychology would be to speak to someone that you can relate to, right? Uh, I don't think that that is I personally, in my experiences, have not found that to be the most significant factor, but I have found that to be a very, important factor when it comes to these sorts of things. So
But when it was my time, during '08 to 2013, it felt differently, right? But I still went. I went to 5 different. The first 4, nothing. It was cool to share my struggles, but I didn't get any help. Why? Because it was irrelevant, right? The practitioners who did not look like me were culturally incompetent. They meant well. I didn't have time to teach them about my lived experiences. I needed tools and strategies. I needed them like yesterday. So after going through 4 different therapists, I gave up on therapy. I knew I was in trouble. It was evidence in my life. I still didn't know where to go. Good friend urged me to take one more attempt to finding a therapist. So I did. Found this gentleman. Walked in his office. I knew the drill, right? Sat down, poured out my heart, right? For the next 30, 35 minutes. And at the end of my spiel, the gentleman looked me in my eye and asked me this question that forever changed my life. He said, "You ever thought about becoming a therapist?" I said, "Man, what? Are you kidding me? I'm here for therapy. I'm not here for career coaching." He said, "No, hear me out." He said, "Look, I am about to retire. I've been doing this 35 years. I've seen Black men come and go.
Wow.
I can't help them. I don't think the entire mental health industry can help them, but I think you can." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, you're not clinically depressed. You're emotionally exhausted. You're sad. You're angry. You're devastated, right? You're going through trauma. You're grieving, but it's not clinical depression. It's the unique experience of being a Black male in this country, right? I'm not asking you to give up on therapy. Just find someone who looks like you. Better yet, become the person you're looking for. You are your own solution.
Hey, man in the mirror, right? Become the solution or the change that you want to see in the world. That's very powerful thing there.
And I left out of his office feeling defeated, right? Devastated, right? Was pissed. Walked out of it. I said, okay, no worries. I'll figure it out. As a matter of fact, I'm not doing anything. 3 weeks later, I started to feel better. His words touched me spiritually, mentally, emotionally. I started feeling lighter, right? Things started to make sense to me. He went on to say, go back to school. Let your journey be a part of your healing. And somehow I think this is your purpose. This is what the last therapist told me. And that's what I did. That gentleman was a middle-aged white guy.
Mm.
So I did what he told me, right? It makes sense.
Thank God for him, bro. Yeah, definitely. Thank God for him. I was lucky because my high school had a black male counselor. Uh, my issues that I was talking to him about didn't really have anything to do with being black necessarily. So that was never really a factor. But it was cool. So I did go through my teen years seeing a black counselor, seeing a black person who would sit down and listen to you and care about your experiences and things like that, which was good, which was definitely good for me, especially at the time that I was seeing him. I definitely needed it. Definitely needed it. It was during the pandemic. I was going through school during the pandemic, and oh my goodness, I should make a video talking about my experience during the pandemic because it's so complicated. Um, but yeah, thankfully he was there.
He said, it's no accident you're here. I did it. The necessary training. I dropped out of PhD program so I can add D to that list of Ds I started off with, right? So I got back in school. I had nothing else going on. It changed my life. So now I spend my days supporting black males, those who care about them and love them, and those who are raising them with a unique approach to black mental health struggles. You see, the struggle is because black men are not being taken care of in a way that really touch, moves, and inspires them, right? Black males, we don't do well with one-on-one, right? We don't like isolation. We definitely don't do well with labeling. You know, in the hood, we call that name calling. We don't do well with that, right? We don't do well with code switching when it comes to our lives, right? And we definitely don't have time to break down our lived experiences from others who need some type of explanation before they can give us some colonized version of how we need to go about healing.
My son is Braxton, and he was diagnosed with a brain tumor.
Interesting that he said colonized version. I don't know what he means by that necessarily. Um, as you know, as I kind of alluded to this, but like me being me being Christian in my own personal experience, me being Christian has been more relevant, me just at a different age and time of my life has been more relevant to the kind of therapy and counseling that I received than me being black. That was never something that was relevant. Uh, but just because it wasn't relevant to me in my experience doesn't necessarily mean it wouldn't be relevant to the experiences of someone else. So I am glad that we have black counselors and therapists, even if they're few, and we should definitely encourage people to more black people to engage in that sort of thing for the reasons that he's giving, of course.
So I set out to create a unique experience for black men to address the Black male mental health struggle. You see, as Black males, I found out we need some things. We know a lot. We just need it in a way that we can use our own language to get it, right? We know about breath work, right? We know about meditation. We know about yoga. We're even for the dialectical approach, the cognitive behavior approach, right? We good with relationship and individual therapy. We'd rather have it in group, barbershop. That's where we're comfortable, right?
That's fair. That's fair. I honestly thought like the whole barbershop like I watched the barbershop movies and I low key thought that was like a stereotype or something. Nah, bro. Nah, bro. This didn't happen in every barbershop I went to, but for a lot of the black barbershops that are like have like multiple people there who are working with multiple different hairs and stuff. Um, no, there's definitely people who like to talk about their life and different things. Yeah, that was definitely an experience of mine.
Most of us have had some type of sport, so we get the importance of breath work. We get that. We just need it to come from someone who looks like us and who has walked the walk and talked the talk, right? See, as Black males, we don't do what you say, we do what you do, right? So if you could tell us, show us, guide us, walk with us, we honor something. And that's what I did. So, how does that look? How does that work in terms of sustaining the existing mental health industry? Well, we have to take more of a uncolonized approach to Black mental health. We have to encourage one another that there are certain signs and symbols that are indicators of distress and not necessarily mental disorders or mental illnesses, right? But we need to be able to convey it to this unique group, Black males, who have been born under racism. Because racism, aggression, and microaggression, born into that, make something of you, right? It's exhausting. So when you start adding on debt and depression and divorce, you get the picture. You have now become exhausted, right? Not necessarily a mental illness, but things are definitely out of order, right?
Yeah, it would be, and maybe he will, but it would be really cool to hear more what he means by an uncolonized approach and how or if colonization has played a role in psychology in the discourse with psychologists and the science around that field and whatnot. I would be curious to know that. That might be something maybe to explore further. But as I mentioned, me and this is just has been in my life in general. Me being black has not really been that relevant. There are some small social things like I can say the N word, um, or I can make race jokes and they're hilarious, but like it hasn't been a huge impact on my life. And as I mentioned, me being Christian has been more impactful in my life than my race. Even just socially, it has been more. I've probably been looked at differently more so for being Christian at a public high school than I was for being white, or excuse me, for being white, for being black at a white majority high school. Uh, so uh, I will agree that black people have a lot of black people can have a unique experience. And furthermore, I will definitely agree, but this is just a seems to be a general fact about uh, uh, mental illness and things like that is that humans can experience a lot of different things without necessarily having a mental illness attached to that. You can go through depression without being clinically depressed. You can uh, obviously grieve, right? Sadness and so on and depression coming along with grieving and a bunch of other things without having a mental illness. That's true, and I've been told that by white psychologists and counselors and such. So I would love maybe maybe he has content on this somewhere else online of him talking about what he means by sort of a colonized answer or approach to things, and how his approach is different than that. Would be very interesting. It From the sounds of it, he has accepted an understanding of critical race theory. I'm not trying to get into all of that and all the like the societal and political stuff, because I'm just not someone who engages in politics. I try to do as much as I can, but I stretch myself pretty thin already with the kind of content that I produce. And so trying to get into politics, especially in the way that I would like to, is would be very challenging uh, with everything else I have going on. But I still see I'm not necessarily disagreeing with him per se, and I do see the value in what he's saying. So
So that's what we need. We need the existing practitioners to become culturally competent.
oh, I will agree with that, and I will also say that it would be important to um, express all of these studies and tools and therapy in a way that can be understood culturally by a black person. That does make sense because, and this is just a fact in general with our language, is that we when we speak with a filter, and that filter is twofold. It's or you say we have two filters. It is cultural and it is personal. So it is cultural language and then personal language. And so to be able to express again these tools that you can learn in therapy and counseling to aid yourself in becoming a better person and handling any mental illness or stressors that you have, uh, expressing those things in a culturally relevant way to help the black male understand and to get on board and to even do those things. I definitely see the value in that as well and the need for that.
On what this means for the people they serve. We need young college students who are black, preferably male, to be encouraged to go into mental health, right? We need the existing black practitioners to be amplified and elevated, right? And we need all of us to know that there is a unique experience for black males that starts when we are born, mostly caused by racism, right? Exacerbated by unemployment, increased with PTSD symptoms due to violence, right? And it starts when we're in elementary school with suspensions and special education referrals.
Yeah, as I mentioned, me being black has not, in my personal experience, has not been that relevant to my life, and I honestly can't say that I am someone who has experienced racism either by, um, at least not like institutionally or anything like that, especially not like from the time that I was born or anything like that. Um, and if I'm being honest, from how I understand racism, I've gotten racism from both black and white people. Obviously, I've had white people, I've seen white people uh, dressed in like um, uh, very Nazi, basically, attire and other things like that. I saw this one person on Monkey who was doing that. Just go on Monkey or Omegle, right? Those free video chatting websites. You'll see racist people there. I've encountered those people. But I think that the black community has also a level of racism to it. At least that's part of the cultural trend, at least, where you have black people who genuinely believe that white people just aren't as good as basketball as they are. Right? It's not like a joke or anything like that. It's like, no, this is legit. Like white people just suck at basketball. Right? Like what? Your skill isn't determined by your race. And there's other things too, but I do see those as significant issues. But in my therapy, in my own unique experience, it hasn't. My race has not played uh, much of a factor, especially in a majority white context. It hasn't really played much of a factor.
So I implore all of us to sustain the existing mental health industry. We have to take into consideration the uniqueness of the Black male mental health struggle. That goes for first responders on every level. It goes for clergy, university, teachers, students, nonprofit organizations, right? Law enforcers, lawmakers, politicians. All of us have to be re-educated on what that means uniquely for Black males and our struggle. And in the spirit of the late, great Earl DMX Simmons, in order to speak for the people, must walk amongst the people. Rest in peace, Dante Wright. Rest in peace, Adam Toledo. Rest in peace, George Floyd. Thank you.
All right. I will wrap up my thoughts here. So, pretty interesting video. I pretty much agree with everything that he said. Again, I was just speaking from my own personal experience when I was saying that like race has not been a factor when it comes to therapy and these sorts of things. Maybe that's just because of my context. I don't really know. But I never really had any concerns about what a cop was going to do to me, for example. Never have. And I still don't. Like, even as a young adult, on my own now, I still don't really have any concern about that. Um, so but I will agree that people have their unique experiences, and race has played a factor in that, and does continue to play a factor in that in some ways, and that should, and I would say that if that's relevant to the struggle that the person you're seeing in therapy, if that's relevant to their situation, then you might want to bring it up and talk and listen and things like that. Obviously, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, but I know that as someone who's in therapy, it would be really weird. I would be uncomfortable if my white uh my white counselor, if I was expressing my situation and my struggles, and my white counselor was like, implied or stated explicitly or asked me um, anything about me being Black in relation to my struggles, because they just haven't been relevant. But with all that said, uh, this video was very interesting. I definitely agree, and I definitely agree that Black men's mental health needs to be addressed as well. So with all of that said, thank you guys for watching so much. I hope this video was helpful for you in some way, and share this video so we can spread awareness around these issues, because as I've been mentioning, these issues definitely need to be addressed. So thank you. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and follow me for more content like this. Thank you.